Hello, beautiful lights, and welcome to another episode of From a Medium's Perspective. Today, I'm going to be continuing our topic that we began last time about the signs, symptoms, and techniques of opening your psychic ability. And today we're going to be focusing more on the techniques. Before I get into some actual exercises that will help you to develop some specific types of psychic gifts, I think you might find it kind of interesting to hear about the advantages and disadvantages and the common strengths and weaknesses of each of the main psychic senses. And people that have, some of us are more geared toward sight, some of us are more geared toward hearing, some toward sensing, some toward knowing. And it doesn't mean that we can't develop the other abilities, but there are certain personalities associated with where we are strongest. I'd like to give credit for some of the things that I'm going to mention today to Pete A. Sanders. He's written a book called You Are Psychic. I really like that book. It's called You Are Psychic by Pete A. Sanders. And although I've omitted some parts and I kind of disagree a little bit with some points, I've also interjected a few thoughts of my own. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge of his thoughts and mine, but I have to give him credit for the structure that he created. As far as the ability of sight, the advantages of clairvoyance or psychic vision, the people that are best at that are good at integrating all of the senses into a plan of action, and they sense those aspects in someone else's aura. Clairvoyance is considered sometimes a general term for the psychic abilities, but it is also considered the best psychic sense for spotting problems and for proving ESP to yourself, because seeing is believing. And of course, clairvoyance, as we've mentioned earlier, is clear seeing. It's considered the most detailed of the psychic senses. The disadvantages are that it often involves symbols, and symbols can be misinterpreted. Unless you pay special attention to the detail, it's one of the slower psychic senses in terms of rendering information. I've mentioned in previous episodes that when you start seeing things clairvoyantly, because they're in your mind's eye and because your guides don't generally want to shock you with information, it's sort of like slow emulsion photography developing, that piece of paper and the chemical, and you look down and there's nothing on it, and then all of a sudden you say, wait, I think I see something. And then as it continues to develop, the picture becomes clearer and clearer. And so people that have a high ability in psychic vision are really excellent at seeing how to integrate a lot of factors. They are good at solving visual spatial challenges like packing and placing furniture, very practical skills of organization. They visualize situations, problems, and solutions and have an excellent sense of color. They can also be a little rigid or inflexible because they may not be able to verbalize until they have the whole picture, which for a client can sometimes lead to a bit of frustration while they're bringing through the words to describe what they're seeing. But as you become more developed, your fluency in interpreting signs and symbols and registering what the visual information is and conveying it deeply and accurately to your client becomes more easy. People that are clairvoyant predominantly can tend toward perfectionism, but they can also be highly self-critical because they really do see both the dark, the light, the ins, the outs, all the details. I found that interesting that it had something to do with other aspects of us in the physical world. The advantages of clairaudience are that words really grab your attention, and they're good for getting guide words and initial direction. I think of them as the shorthand of spirit because words comprise maybe 7% of communication. They can help us interpret the thoughts of those in spirit by getting particular phrases or a word or a sound of a word. Sometimes you can feel the syllables that a name contains or maybe the letter that it starts with. You can begin hearing that. You could also see that too. The disadvantage is that You may not hear completely clearly, so it's hit or miss. The initial difficulty of separating your thoughts from those of spirit can happen. So we can have an intrusive thought that we think is ours, but then it doesn't really register with what's going on in our life. Or we could hear something and it doesn't make sense to us. Or we might superimpose or overlay our thoughts over what the rest of the sentence should be. And it's really important to hear clearly when you're doing a reading. One of the interesting stories that happened when I was listening to a mother convey messages to her daughter is she quoted something, and I thought it was a misquote. What she said was, "Too many pots spoil the kitchen." And I was arguing in my left brain, no, that's not the phrase. It's too many cooks spoil the pot. But she clearly said, too many pots spoil the kitchen. And my client just fell over laughing because apparently after her mother passed, they found marijuana in her kitchen. And that was her mother's way of acknowledging that she knew that they had found her stash. So it is important to relay those exact words that you hear, even if they don't quite make sense to you. Hearing is sometimes considered the most difficult to develop because spirit actually speaks with emotions and tells stories with their energy and gives feelings and impressions, because emotion is the language of the spirit world and words are the language of the physical world. Some consider it the least important of the gifts to develop because the fuller messages are contained in the emotions and feelings and sometimes imagery of stuff. There is a practice of reading billets, which is when you have a piece of paper with the name of different people in spirit and maybe a question written down, and you are in a meeting where the mediums are reaching in a basket and pulling out your billet. If you hear the words telepathically, you could hear it telepathically from the person that wrote it. You could pick it up psychometrically from the piece of paper, or you literally could be hearing it from the spirit as they introduce themselves. So even though the listeners might be very impressed with, I've got your Uncle Bob here, or they might make a phrase that uses the term Bob, it's not necessarily proof that someone else is there. Generally is, but it can also be indication of something else too. So that's why they feel it's maybe the least important of the gift to develop, because the real proof, we would think that because we live in the physical world, that name, address, phone number are the most important things for us to hear from spirit. But when somebody is out of body, those things are really less important to them than they are here in the physical. And what's important to them are relationships, personalities, emotions. And so they tend to speak in the language of spirit, and the words, again, are just a very small part of the proof that you're speaking with someone else. Some of the strengths of clairaudience is the ability to talk mind to mind and to transmit psychic thoughts, like I did in the reading about the mother and the kitchen. Those are strong abilities. And people that are clairaudient versus clairvoyant may not get overloaded psychically as much, but they can sometimes be overly analytical or come on too strong, or they might radiate too much mental energy, which could be off-putting to a client, because when somebody is sitting there in grief or looking for answers in their personal life, they're looking for an empathic connection sometimes, unless they are looking for a demonstration or a gallery reading or something like that. And people that are clairaudient primarily may be the least sensitive to the subtle psychic vibrations of emotion and feeling and the stories that are embedded in those connective experiences. So again, you can develop any of the gifts if that's what your focus is. Knowing, claircognizance. The advantage of intuition or just knowing is that it offers you an early warning system. It can keep you in tune with the future, just knowing, oh, that's not going to work out, or you should do that, or those feelings about the right path to take. They are very helpful with remote scanning. Claircognizance, our intuitive psychic ability, is probably one of the most unlimited of the psychic senses. The disadvantage in knowing is that the impressions are very fleeting, very quick, and they're sometimes difficult to capture because, like that of the dream state, they don't often have supporting information. That's actually true too, I think, in terms of clairvoyance too, although a visual image does tend to stick with us a little bit more, but those impressions that we get where we are feeling something, that's the part where it is good to be quiet during that part of the reading so that your psychic or medium can sense those things, because they're needing to retain their dream state, their theta. Claircognizance or clear knowing is the hardest one to trust initially, and that has to do with the contrast between physical evidence that we can see and touch versus our feeling that our knowing that it isn't going to be that way. It might not make sense to us. We might meet a happy couple and just have a knowledge that that's going to end in a very bad way, and then we're looking for reasons that it would be that way, and of course there aren't any on the surface. So that's why it's a little bit difficult sometimes to trust your claircognizance, your clear knowing at the beginning. You can develop a great deal of confidence once reached a certain depth and you begin trusting the information. And it is really a great indicator of problems or difficulties that are coming. And it comes so quickly that you get a natural sense of how to be at the right place at the right time, kind of thing, advising your client that way. Intuitive, claircognizant people don't generally spend a lot of time worrying. They're innovators and they just instinctively know the needs of their family and loved ones. They're very fast in their perception. The weakness of an intuitive is that they can, or a claircognizant, one who's primarily claircognizant, clear knowing, is that they might become overwhelmed by the volume of thoughts or ideas that they pick up, and they can receive information so far in advance that the people around them don't relate to it when they're talking about it. So they can say, be sure you take your checkbook to somebody as they leave, because they have a feeling they're going to need their checkbook when the person doesn't normally carry it. And the person listening could give them a look like, I don't need my checkbook. I never take my checkbook. I don't even like taking my checkbook in case it gets lost. And then, of course, they find out that they did need their checkbook. But people that function at that speed can become really bored or might not even finish a project because they've already thought it through and gone through it, and they're ahead of other people's timing and are sometimes resented for it, so they can speak too quickly or blurt out what comes to mind without thinking and not realize that they're kind of ahead of the game. So if you're a little restless, you might be predominantly a claircognizant, and you could develop some of the other gifts too to balance that. Clear feeling. The advantages of empathy or clairsentience is the most natural of the psychic senses. It's the easiest to develop, and it is best for discerning and interpreting subtle energy patterns, because there's a great deal of awareness with clairsentience, clear feeling, or empathy. It's the best psychic sense because it connects you to other people and their emotions. It's really good for monitoring your personal safety and sense of protection. You might feel ahead of time the intent of somebody and it could protect you. So clear feeling is the most difficult to remain detached during, because you are enmeshed with the feelings of other people. The strengths of an empath are that they have sensitivity to the feelings of others, which means that they can anticipate the needs in kind of a codependent way and keep life and work feeling comfortable and livable. And they give of themselves very sincerely. They're flexible and good at adapting to keep everyone happy. And they do trust their feelings, and they may cover their emotions if they sense that something is not right because they don't want to offend anyone. They're going to give really good hugs. It's best if you're an empath to be paired up with an empath in personal relationships so that there's a give and take and not that dichotomy of the empath sociopath thing that happens so often with empaths as they give their emotions to someone who just is only concerned about their own emotions. The weakness of an empath is that they plan to pick up on other people's feelings, and in doing so, they can take on those feelings themselves. So they want to avoid harming other people, but then they project so hard into how that person might be feeling that they start feeling that. I have a very sweet friend that has been anticipating some things that are going to be very difficult for her and for her family to cope with. And she's just been distraught as she projected into the future about how that was going to feel and how it would affect her. And she was finally able to disentangle herself, just be responsible for her own emotions. So it's very important for empaths to know what's your emotion and what isn't your emotion. Empaths or clairsentients can become easily overloaded, and they can become overly emotional or overwhelmed by their feelings. And they can have trouble being on time or meeting deadlines just because they flow and feel their way through things. And because they're emotionally connected, they are kind of assuming everybody else is, which is not always the case. They're very sensitive people, very much hurt by rejection. Let's talk about some ways to open your ability. Actually, the best and most lasting way to open up your ability is old school, and there really are no shortcuts to it. And that is through concentration, meditation, and contemplation. Many of you may say, well, that's just boring, or I've tried it and it doesn't work, or my mind's too busy. But like any skill, you really have to practice and dedicate yourself to doing so. If you want the body of an athlete, you're going to have to live the lifestyle of an athlete. You'd have to eat and exercise accordingly. And if you want the ability of a developed medium, you're going to have to adopt the practices of a developed medium. And the emphasis, of course, is on the word developed. So to develop your psychic abilities that extend from the physical senses, the easiest way is to focus on the physical senses that are attached to the psychic ability in a meditation. And by that, I mean, if you are trying to develop your clairaudience, you need to listen. You can do a meditation where you just relax your body and you tune in and you hear every little sound inside your body, around you, in the room, outside the room, etc. And you might think, well, what good is it to practice a physical skill if it's a psychic ability? It enhances our awareness, and there is a correlation between the two worlds, and our perception is linked through our chakras. So as we tune our physical hearing in, we create hypersensitivity that allows us to experience and hear more easily the words of those in spirit and our intuition too. And the same goes true for clairvoyance. If you want to, you can just visualize things in your mind, picture objects, and just practice manipulating those objects in your mind. You can go to your memory screen where you project your memories. Just pick a memory that you want to revisit, a positive one. Allow that memory to plan out and pay attention to all the little details of that memory. The same thing would be true if you wanted to look at clouds, to just really look at the clouds, relax your mind, and allow images to start coming to you. What shapes do you see? Children do this so naturally, but we as adults get so busy that we forget to do that. That's one way that you could develop your clairvoyance. If you wanted to develop your clairsentience, your feeling, one good way would be to feel your physical body. Just feel the surface of your skin, the cool, the hot, the pressure of your body on the seat or the bed. Inside your own body, feel and sense your own energy as it emits from you, because most of our being is actually outside the physical body. Even they consider our mind as outside the physical body. So becoming aware of where your energy begins and ends. One way you can do that is with a friend. If you're close to somebody, you can ask them, hey, let's stand and we'll close our eyes and be apart and we'll reach our hands toward each other. And one of us will be the one that stands still and the other one will be the sensor. You can just feel, and you can begin walking toward that person until you can feel their energy. And it may start a lot sooner than you expect, because we actually do have a great awareness of energy and we are comprised of it and we can sense it. Again, this is using a physical sense that's attached to a psychic ability in a meditation. If you want to build your claircognizance, your clear knowing, then you have to understand that the two sides of the brain work really differently. So the subconscious can seem very random because you don't have any physical proof of what you're perceiving. Your left brain might say, well, that doesn't make sense. It's okay because you're not crazy. You can just allow the information and you can practice disassociating yourself from the outcome of a situation and from the information that you get yourself, and just give someone what you get. You can have them tell you a situation and ask you, what should I do? And then you have to detach yourself emotionally from trying to impress them. You have to put down your ego. You have to put down your intellect, your preconceived ideas, and just see what you know, see what you feel. Just separate yourself from their question so that it's a very neutral and objective answer. And when you give information, just give what you get. You don't give any more or less than you receive, but pay attention to the detail, but don't elaborate or jump to a conclusion, because your brain wants to force things into an understandable format. But that understandable format to your left brain, your analytical brain, may not be the proof and the evidence that you need to give your client. So just allow the information to be the information. Notice where it comes from, and be very specific when you're describing the information to your client. Did you see it? Did you hear it? Did you know it? Did you sense it? And be very honest. Don't say, well, I'm seeing somebody, when you're actually just hearing their name. Or if you're hearing their name, say, I'm hearing the name such and such. Does that mean anything to you? And don't worry about it. You're not responsible for whether or not someone understands that information. You're just responsible for conveying it compassionately with as much detail as you're able to give. You'll see a lot of exercises that start out psychic development with balancing your chakras. There are probably 1,000 chakra balancing meditations online. And that's important. You know, it is important to be grounded. It is important to be in touch with that sense of peace within you. And if it helps you to go through each of your chakras so that you have a balance, sometimes we have to be a little more ritualistic or methodical when we begin. Very important to break things down into the components, like clear the space, ground yourself, connect to the highest vibrations and invoke their protection, relax, receive the information, or set the intent and then receive the information. And then once you're done, close your energies. But as you get better and better at that, you're going to do that really fast and really natural. And literally in just a split second, you can get in that zone. If you missed the first half of the show, or you'd like to listen to other past episodes, they're here on YouTube. And please subscribe to my channel. It's Medium Tracey Lockwood. I'd really love that. And if you'd like information about private readings or private psychic tutoring by Skype or certification, please visit my website at mediumtracylockwood.com. I wanted to leave you with Psychic Etiquette 101, and this is something that I used to do in the learning circles that I taught. Now we do a little bit different, but I think it sets the tone for appropriate psychic etiquette. The purpose of this learning circle is the exploration and expansion of our personal spiritual gifts and the witnessing of spirit at work with others in a safe, positive, and loving atmosphere. In creating an atmosphere of love, we will affirm and energetically support each other as we work. We will not criticize or belittle anyone. In creating an atmosphere of tolerance, we will treat each other with respect, regardless of our individual perceptions of another's mental, physical, or spiritual development. In creating an atmosphere of kindness, we will only relay messages of encouragement and comfort. We will not give information that would cause distress, embarrassment, or offense. In creating an atmosphere of harmony, we will only give personal messages to others within the context of a message-bearing exercise. In creating an atmosphere of privacy, we will not diagnose or prescribe, prophesy, or give life advice outside of a private one-on-one reading. In creating an atmosphere of respect, we will arrive a little early and listen quietly while others are working with spirit. In creating an atmosphere of professionalism, we will provide evidential links to a particular spirit, and once this link has been established by the recipient, only then will we present a clairvoyant or clairaudient message. In creating an atmosphere of ethical mediumship, we will abide by all moral and legal ethics and by the laws of the land. In creating an atmosphere of fun, we will allow the inner child in us to recognize the inner child in others, and we will celebrate the joys of working with spirit. Let's play. Namaste. Again, if you would like to find me, you can find me at mediumtracylockwood.com or friend me on Facebook at Psychic Medium Tracey Lockwood. I will see you next week for a view of life from a medium's perspective. And remember, it's never inappropriate to be kind. And without integrity, you have nothing.